My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is that for 6 years, my own family let me carry a felony that wasn't mine at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas morning, every birthday candle blown out over a lie sitting in the room like a stain. Nobody wanted to name. They told me to take the blame for a hit and run I didn't commit. My sister's hit and run. What they didn't know is that my sister didn't just let me take it. She needed me to take it for a reason she buried even deeper than the accident itself. And they never once thought to ask what I actually did for a living. Because if they had, they'd have learned something. That would have ended this story a lot sooner than it ended. I'm a judge. This is the story of how I let them bury me under a lie for 6 years. And how I dug myself out, using the one thing they never respected. The law. And the one person they never fully understood. My sister. Rewind 6 years. I was 29. A public defender, running on gas station, coffee and a stubborn belief that the system could be fair if enough people fought for it. My sister Dana was 20 for golden, adored, the one my parents bragged about at church. A Friday night in October, Dana had been drinking at a birthday party. She called me at 11:47 p.m. for words. I hit someone. Help. I got there before my conscience did. A man named Robert Alvarez, 41, a night shift warehouse worker walking home from a bus stop, had been struck outside a crosswalk. He survived barely. Shattered pelvis, fractured skull, 11 weeks in the hospital, a limp that would never fully leave him. My father pulled me aside before the police finished their statements. You weren't drinking tonight. You take this one. Dana can't have a record, she has her whole life ahead of her. I said no at first. Then my mother cried. Then Dana cried harder and said something I didn't think much of at the time, but that I would replay in my head for years afterward. Elena, please, if this comes out, it's not just bad. It's over for me. You don't understand how over. I thought she meant her nursing program. I thought she meant embarrassment. I told the officer I was driving. I pled to leaving the scene of an accident causing serious bodily injury, a reduced charge, built around the profile of a sober, first-time offender with no record. I lost my job. You cannot represent indigent clients in criminal court with a fresh conviction on your file. 6 months suspended. 3 years probation, 400 hours of community service, restitution paid almost entirely from my own savings once my family's promises to help quietly stopped being mentioned. Nobody ever said thank you. Instead, the story rewrote itself. 2 years later, at a cousin's wedding, I overheard my aunt call me always a little reckless. Even as a kid, a complete fabrication, built on a lie I'd been pressured into telling. Dana kept her nursing acceptance. Dana kept her name clean. Dana kept smiling in family photos. I left the state within the year. They never asked what fresh start meant. They had already decided who I was. They had no idea that under a different last name, 3 years later, I would be sitting on the bench. Here's the part I didn't know for 6 years, the part that turns this from a story about a spoiled sister into something colder. While rebuilding my career, I spent 2 years at an innocence project, learning to read old case files the way a surgeon reads an X-ray for what's missing, not just what's there. And one night, working late on an unrelated wrongful conviction case, I ran a routine record search on a name out of habit, the way you check an old wound to see if it still hurts. I found a sealed juvenile diversion record, Dana's. 18 months before the accident that put Robert Alvarez in the hospital, Dana had been stopped for reckless driving and refused a breathalyzer because she was 22 and it was handled through a diversion program. The record was sealed, but sealed records still exist. They just require the right person in the right position with the right reason to unseal them. Under the state's habitual offender enhancement statute, a second serious driving offense within a certain window doesn't just add a charge. It changes the entire classification of the crime, from an offense eligible for probation to one carrying a mandatory minimum prison term. Dana wasn't protecting her nursing school acceptance that night. She was protecting herself from prison, and she let me find that out on my own. 6 years later, alone, at M, in an office 3 states away from anyone who could explain it to my face. I sat on that discovery for almost a year. I told no one. I wasn't ready to blow up my own life a second time chasing a truth I couldn't yet prove cleanly, and as an officer of the court, I understood better than anyone that finding something and proving something are very different, very dangerous things to confuse. Then, 3 years into my judicial career, during my confirmation for a permanent appointment, an anonymous letter arrived at the Judicial Nominating Commission. It referenced my 6-year-old conviction accurately, in detail, including facts that were never part of the public record, like the exact restitution amount I'd paid. Only a small handful of people had access to those numbers. My parents, my old lawyer, and Dana. It didn't derail my appointment. The commission investigated, found the conviction predated my legal career and had been fully served, and confirmed me anyway. But it told me something I needed to know. My silence had never been safety to my family. It had been a leash. As long as I stayed quiet, the story stayed theirs to control. The moment I started rising somewhere they couldn't see me, someone made sure I'd be reminded who was supposed to stay small. I never found hard proof it was Dana. I didn't need it. I just needed to stop being surprised by her. 6 years after that October night, my mother calls. Dana's engaged. There's an engagement dinner. Everyone is invited, including me, because it's time to let bygones be bygones. I almost didn't go. But 3 months earlier, a civil discovery dispute tied to old insurance records from Robert Alvarez's case had crossed my docket, not as the presiding judge on the merits, but at the initial filing stage, before conflict screening caught the connection to my sealed file. The moment I recognized the name, I did exactly what judicial ethics require. I disclosed the conflict on the record and recused myself immediately, referring the matter to another judge and, separately, flagging what I'd independently learned to the District Attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit, the unit that actually handles claims of wrongful conviction, not judges acting on their own authority. That unit doesn't move because a judge has feelings about her sister. It moves because of evidence. And by the time of that dinner, the evidence had started moving on its own. I walked in wearing a simple navy dress. My mother hugged me like 6 years hadn't happened. Dana, glowing, pregnant with her second child, barely looked up. My mother stood to toast Dana's incredible journey, calling the past 6 years simply some hard years. Vague, passive, like weather. I stood, not dramatically, just the way I ask for order in my courtroom. I have something to share too, I said. Since we're being proud of journeys tonight, I told them my legal name, my occupation, my county. Then I did the thing I hadn't planned to do until that exact moment. The thing that made this more than a confession and turned it into a reckoning. I'd asked Robert Alvarez, weeks earlier, if he'd be willing to record a short statement for the conviction integrity unit's file standard. Procedural, nothing dramatic. He'd agreed. And because he wanted the truth handled properly rather than quietly, he'd also agreed to let me share that statement with my family directly, so no one could later claim I was lying about what he'd said. I played 11 seconds of it. Just his voice, calm and unhurried, saying that the woman who visited him once in the hospital apologetic, refusing to meet his eyes, was never the woman convicted of hitting him. Dana's Fianchi's family went very quiet. Dana didn't cry. She looked at me the way you look at someone who has finally stopped being predictable. You don't understand what you're doing, she said, low. Just for me, there's a reason it had to be you. I know about the diversion record, Dana, I said. I've known for a while. So has someone whose job it is to care. For the first time in 6 years, my sister had nothing scripted to say. I want to be honest about what happened next, because the neat version of this story ends with my sister in handcuffs at her own engagement dinner. That's not what happened. And frankly, that's not how the system is supposed to work. Even in a story about the system finally working for me, what happened was slower and more correct. The Conviction Integrity Unit's review, combined with Robert Alvarez's new statement, repair shop records inconsistent with Dana's account, and the previously sealed diversion record, establishing motive for the original cover-up, led to a formal post-conviction relief petition. 8 months later, My conviction was vacated by the court that originally accepted the plea, not because a judge somewhere pulled a string, but because the underlying facts no longer supported it. Dana was charged separately, not simply recharged with the original hit and run, which carried its own statute of limitations complications, but with new counts tied to the false statements made at the time, this time without a diversion program available to soften it, because you generally only get that option once. I didn't celebrate. 6 years of my life don't come back because a court finally corrects a record. The job I loved, the reputation I rebuilt from nothing, the years my family spent introducing me, when they introduced me at all, as a cautionary tale instead of a daughter, none of that reverses. But the truth, finally, sat exactly where it belonged. And for the first time since I was 29 years old. So did I. My family didn't lose everything, but they lost the one thing they were most sure they'd never have to give up. The story. The version where I was reckless and Dana was golden. Where my silence was owed to them instead of stolen from me. They asked for that silence once, and I gave it, because I was young enough to believe love meant sacrifice without limit. They never asked what I became in the years I spent rebuilding what they broke. And they never imagined that the sister they were so sure would just absorb the damage and disappear, had spent 6 years becoming exactly the kind of person who reads a file, finds the crack in it, and lets the truth do what truth eventually always does. She gets up, she testifies, and this time, nobody gets to tell her to sit back down.